morning. Welcome to another installment of our virtual seminar Grove. We're very excited about today. We're brought to you by Cedar City Bryan Head Tourism Bureau. I'm Michael Bahr, the Education Director for the festival, and I have with me Brian Vaughn. Brian, we've got a big day today, right?
Michael, hello. Yes, we do.
Yeah, what are we going to be talking about today?
We are going to be talking about Shakespeare-in-the-Schools and our educational tour, which is a crucial piece of programming here at the Utah Shakespeare Festival. And I'm excited to sort of chat about its history.
Let's invite all of our guests in. We've got a huge crew. I think this is the largest group we have ever had join us in the Seminar Grove. So welcome. We have a huge company here and designers as well. And we're very excited. This is the present company for Julius Caesar, which is going to actually be rehearsing and performing in a little different format. But let's find out who these people are, Brian, first, shall we?
Let's do it. Yes, please. Well, cool. Why don't we start with our designers, who have a long history with the festival and also the tour. So why don't you guys introduce yourselves, and then we'll go around the Zoom and introduce our cast, who is currently here in Cedar City, quarantined currently, and working via Zoom as we put the show up right now. But why don't we start with Ben Hohman?
Ben Hohman. I'm the props director at the festival. I've been doing the tour for 20 years, and I've designed 18 of the last 20 productions scenery-wise.
Great.
Awesome. And Mr. Steven Schmid.
Steve Schmid, I'm the costume designer. I have been involved in the last 6 and designed the last 5 that have gone.
Which we're going to talk a little bit about designing for a touring production, which has to perform in 75 different venues, so 120 different schools, ranging from correctional facilities to large gyms, et cetera, takes a certain finesse, and then boxing it all up too. And our present challenge brings that too. I want to meet our tour here though first. So Brian, in addition to introduction, let's find out what role they're playing, where they're from, and do we want to find out how they got into theater at this point, or want to save that for later in the hour?
Let's save that for the hour. Why don't we go around right now and just find out who you are, what you're playing within Julius Caesar, and where you are traveling from.
Right.
Why don't we start with Cordell Cole on my screen here.
Mm-hmm. Hi, everybody. Like Brian said, I'm Cordell Cole. I'm playing Mark Antony in this production, and I'm from Dalton, Georgia, the carpet capital of the world, baby.
Excellent. Daria?
Hi, everyone. I'm Daria Pilar-Aritas. I'm playing Cassius, and I'm originally from Ohio. I am a suburban girl, but I live in New York City now, trying to get used to that life.
Excellent. Bailey Blaze.
Hello, my name is Bailey Blaze. I am from Jefferson City, Missouri, and I am doing Decius, Portia, Citizen, and then Octavius.
Excellent. Kenna.
Hi, I'm Kenna Funk, and I am from the tiniest town in Northern California, and I'm playing Casca and a citizen.
Excellent. Isabella.
Hi, I'm Isabella Abel Suarez. I'm playing Cinna the Poet, Calpurnia, Cinna the Conspirator, Citizen, and there's another one. Oh my God. Lucius, the most important one. And I'm coming from Vegas today.
Excellent.
Not today.
Bailey.
Hey, I'm Bailey Savage. I am playing Julius Caesar. You might have seen me in the physical Seminar Grove, where I worked for a couple years, but I'm from Washington State originally and been out in Chicago for the past couple years.
Excellent. Gilberto.
Hi, I'm Gilberto Sainz. I am originally from Donna, Texas, heart of the Rio Grande Valley, but I am here now for the first time at Utah, and I am playing the soothsayer, Medalus, and also Mob and Citizen.
Awesome. And Mr. Jeremy Thompson.
Hi, I am Jeremy Lee Thompson, and I'm playing Brutus, and I came here from Seattle, Washington.
Awesome. Well, as you can see, Julius Caesar is a massive play and with a gazillion roles. And that's one of the unique things about the tour is, you know, how we condense this down to a 80-minute production, essentially. In many ways, sort of the highlights of each particular play. And taking this big epic, you know, tragedy by Shakespeare and sort of made it accessible for young people as well as old. But how you guys are playing multiple characters throughout the show, and I think we can talk about that, you know, as we go through in the evolution of the tour. Michael, I think it might be worth talking about sort of the history of what types of plays have been a part of this, the Shakespeare in the Schools. I mean, I immediately think of like curriculum and how, you know, what is being taught in the schools as far as English class or drama class and so forth, and how the trajectory of the tour over 26 years now, what plays you've more frequently done than others. I know with Julius Caesar, this is, I believe, only our second time doing Julius Caesar, and it seems an apropos selection currently. In our world, I can think of no better play right now that is reflective of our current world. And that's, again, part of some of the selection behind our selections each year for the tour. But there's also kind of this educational component. Am I right?
Yes, in fact, a great visionary, actually one of the first education directors. I always like to say that Fred Adams was the first education director, but the first official education director at the Utah Shakespeare Festival was a man named Gary Armagnac, and quite a visionary. And he, when he came in, he said, we need to create this touring production to take it out. And so in that first, they picked a play that is frequently used in the curriculum, which is Macbeth. And they had a year, they took it out and did Macbeth, and then a second year they did Macbeth. And I know one of the young actors that was in that first company, his name was Brian Vaughn.
That's right. You want to see a little photo here? I pulled this.
I love it.
This is kind of fun. It's a very baby-faced Mackers there with the shrouded witches. That's aging me, 1995. Yeah, it was fun.
So 2 years of that. And then after that, there was a Hamlet, and there was also a Romeo and Juliet. And there are certain shows that tend to come up frequently. And I actually think to help us tell this story, the best way to do that is we're just going to throw a number of images up here so you can see those things. So let's get this slideshow up there. And I'm going to let Ben Hohman, who has been with us for this. This opening shot is from a production of Macbeth that Chris Clark directed for us. Let's go to the next slide. We're going to take a look at, there's the production history from 95, Macbeth, all the way through our current Julius Caesar. And you'll notice we're going to talk about three major shows, Macbeth and Midsummer Night's Dream and Romeo and Juliet, but we've also done Taming of the Shrew, we've also done Hamlet, we've done Twelfth Night, and the Tempest that have also been included in that as well. Ben, I'm going to let you talk a little bit about the images that they're seeing here. So tell us a little bit about what it takes to put this production and these processes together.
Sure. So the biggest thing about the touring production, or really any production, is the director's vision for the show. So you have the script, which is hundreds of years old, but every director has a different take on the show, like the message they want the audience to get out of it and things like that. So you sort of take that director's concept statement and you start thinking about ways that you can visualize or help to tell that story with physical objects. So as you look at these productions of Macbeth, Midsummer, and Romeo and Juliet, you know, they all look very different from each other, but we're telling the same basic story. This one was really fun, this 2011 one, because it was all ladders and like found objects, which was kind of fun. And our witches were wearing these stilts that they jumped around on stage with. But so the biggest thing is sort of is finding that concept and then finding the physical representation of that. And then working with the director and the other designers to find a way to manifest that for the production. So that's the design aspect of it. The part that the director doesn't get super involved with, but is also really important for us as the design team, is this has to travel to 70 plus locations, everywhere from large theaters like the Randall Jones here in Cedar, or the Grand Theater in Salt Lake, to tiny little community centers on Indian reservations, or gyms, or gym cafetoriums, which are some of our favorite venues to play in. Or for years and years, we went to Pahrump, Utah, or Pahrump, Nevada, and they had this tiny little space with an 8-foot ceiling. So most of our venues, we ask for 20 feet in height to give us a little bit of, presence. But we also have to think about how this plays in a really small venue as well. So the design is the first part of it, and then figuring out how it's going to fit in all these venues and fit in the truck, and that the 7 or 8 actors and the 2 technicians can get it out of the truck, get it set up, do the show, get it packed up, get it back in the truck, go somewhere else, sometimes 2 different venues in a day. All that kind of stuff becomes the next sort of level of this. So it's sort of designing it twice, once for the production and then once to make it work on the road, which it keeps it really interesting. And it's been really fun over the years, different technology, like this 2019 production of Macbeth. We had a lot more LED lighting and stuff, which allowed us to tell the story in a different way visually because of the lighting that we could do on the show. Those kind of things. This is my first production that I designed, this 2002 Midsummer. And the tree, it was a crazy thing. And I don't know how we ever did it, because this was when we had our small trailer before we used to get the truck. But there's this like little island thing in this tree that Puck could actually climb. And the canopy is all made out of pieces of fabric. And for Pahrump, we actually made, we called it the Pahrump stump. And it literally was like a 1-foot tall stump that went in the same spot where the tree was. And Puck would sort of crouch on top of this little stump so that he wouldn't hit his head. But so that's kind of the biggest thing, is making sure that we're telling the director's version of the story. This is another Midsummer. This Brian Vaughn directed this production. And also making sure that visually we're helping to tell the story, like by blocking out obstructions. So we often have some sort of backdrop that if you're in a gym, you're not seeing the bleachers across the way from you or things like that. So yeah, it's mostly about finding the through line with the director, the concept, and then making sure that we find a way to point out the details the director feels are really important in the script. So yeah, that's basically what I have to say.
Cool. Stephen, we're timing up pretty nicely here too. We're coming up on some productions that you've been involved with. I know the next slide that we're going to get into, not that one, but the next slide is a Midsummer Night's Dream that I think was pretty special. What was different about this production, Stephen?
This was my first design here, and the director came with this concept of literally the page coming to life, which was challenging. So as you can see, the text all over the set, the costumes, these are a very early production of them, but they're all made out of a product called Tyvek, which you can write on, and it reads and crinkles like paper. So by the end of the tour, these all had texts and messages from the audience, and some of them from the cast members themselves, and it just kind of became this evolving, living thing that was really fun and exciting to involve that that part of the audience in the telling of the story.
Cool. Midsummer Nights, Romeo and Juliet, we still performed in Pahrump, and we had to create a balcony that was a mini-me balcony as we did it. And again, we've also done productions. This particular production you're looking at right here, Richard Gertain, who is running and is our production manager now, actually designed this set for us. This is directed by Ann Tully. Very non-traditional, but the students really loved it. And that's part of the goal here. It's the #1 goal. What can we do to make these productions relevant and resonate with the audience? This is directed by John McClay. John McClay, they're very, very simple set, Asian influenced, and a simple bridge between 2 houses, Melissa, playing Juliet there. And we're coming up on another recent design of both Ben and Stephen. And this was our last year production of Romeo and Juliet, which members of our present company have been involved with, which was set in a high school classroom. Any of you have anything you want to say about that, Stephen or Ben?
Yeah. Well, always the challenge for me is we're given 7 or 8 actors with usually these sweeping cast lists of sometimes 20 to 30 characters that audiences have come to love and expect. And so it's how to help the performers transition between those and still have clarity of story. So we do a lot of simple things with hoodies and beanies and gloves and a shawl serve multiple purposes in this show. And so it's really coming down to those essentials of the storytelling.
Wonderful. I do want to celebrate, Brian, help me out here, the multiple artists that were involved as directors within the touring production. So we had Gary Armagnac, who I mentioned was the visionary who first started the tour, Ann Tully, Brian Vaughn, John McClay, Melinda Funstein, Chris Villa, Britannia Howe, Jan Shelton Hunsaker, Frank Hauntz, Quinn Matfield, Jason Spellbring. Sarah, I think that's all of our artists that we've had, and I've enjoyed having
Bahr.
Well, yeah, Michael Bahr. There is that guy too. I've actually enjoyed having multiple voices coming and being involved with it, because it helps you see the text and recognize things in the text that you haven't necessarily seen or unpacked before, which is really, really exciting to take out to the schools. So there's,
I always find it interesting, we are a Shakespeare company, sort of like that's our thing. And so it's the idea of getting Shakespeare out into the schools, and the idea of taking something from the page to a more theatrical form. And I've always felt that with the plays, it's better to hear them, it's better to see them, experience them. And what I always find so unique about this is the people inside them sort of make these plays resonate in different ways. And I think that that's something actually that's really vital where we are in our world right now. It's like taking this sort of, hundreds of years old text and kind of going, well, we need to look at this through a different lens, and make it relevant and resonant for us now in the world that we are in now. And I know that that's been a sort of an evolution, I think, with the tour also, and sort of going, okay, how we've done Midsummer, we've done Macbeth, we've done Romeo and Juliet. Maybe we can open this up to some of these other plays that, are maybe trickier. I mean, Julius Caesar, I would say, is not the most easily digestible play for a young person, but I do think it's relevant. And I do think it, by seeing it, I think it opens up a whole new atmosphere and a whole new element of understanding that you might not get just by reading it, because sometimes it can appear dense on the page. Even the Tempest, which we've only done once in the history of the tour. And I know that's something Michael and I have talked about, of like, maybe expanding outside of what we call the normal sort of Midsummer R&J, the ones that we sort of look as like kind of the top 5 Shakespeare plays that are frequently done. But in many ways, that's an entry point for young people, to sort of see the plays, hear the plays, and understand language, and really theater. I would love to know from the panel just your first experience with theater. What that was, your first time seeing something live, and what that did for you. What brought you to the theater, essentially. And you just maybe have some hands, or if anybody wants to. I could call on you, but I won't do that. Yeah, Cordell.
Well, my first introduction to the stage was playing Bundles McCloskey the Laundryman and Annie Jr. at the Community Theater in Dalton, Georgia. Once again, carpet capital of the world. Thank you very much. And from there on, I honestly just kind of did it as a hobby. I never thought I'd do it as a career. I was actually, my goal in high school was to get a Division I track scholarship to go to college, and then I broke my ankle, and that took a long time to kind of rehab and come back from. So I was just looking for something to do when I did a high school play, and they took it to the Georgia Theater Conference. And I think that's kind of what we've been talking about, is the community. So I'd never been around as big a theater community as that before. And I'd never seen as many people longing to tell stories. And I think that's kind of what began my addiction to it, was just being around this congregation of people that wanted to tell these stories, and then to get to tell these kinds of stories with such depth, and that kind of dive into the pinnacle of the human heart. So I think that's kind of what attracted me to it, and what keeps me in it, is the congregation and getting to dive into these emotional and real stories, and getting to tell these stories.
Great. Anybody else?
Go
ahead, Jeremy.
Cordell, did we know this about each other? I was Bundles in 7th grade. My first musical.
I think we know what our production is next season.
There you go. Bundle. Jeremy, go ahead.
That was one of my first. I grew up in Ashland, Oregon, actually. And so I was lucky enough to have the Oregon Shakespeare Festival right next door. And I started doing school shows in middle school. But then when I was growing up, we were lucky enough that the plays we were reading in high school, we would then go see as well. And I was unaware when I grew up and left town that not everybody got that experience. And so one of the things that I really love about doing tours like this is when you get to show Shakespeare to students, which I so remember being and having that first experience of seeing Shakespeare and going, oh my gosh, I understood that. Because I think a lot of kids are told Shakespeare is hard before they get the chance to even experience it. And so they make it, oh, it's hard. Well, I guess I'll struggle through it. But if you give people the chance to understand it, it's not as hard as people are told it is.
Sweet. Who else? I saw multiple hands. Who's next? Go ahead, Daria.
Well, for me, it all started for me, I think, with the love of TV and film. And as a kid, it took me so long to grasp the concept of acting and what that was, because the fact that it wasn't real, but these weren't regular people that, were walking around outside my door. These were people that were acting and had situations just like me, but it's not actually real. That was fascinating to me. And that is the part of acting that I think I have always clung on to ever since like third grade, things being like real and honest and close to home and reachable. And I think that's something that we want to, like, especially when it comes to talking to children, and that's even gotten me in trouble too, like with naturalism, which is where my roots are, where my introduction was, because something I know I've heard so many times from directors where, that was great for the camera. Now, can you tell it to 3,000 people? And, size and Shakespeare. And I have some experience with like musical theater. And I think that marrying of size, which I think Shakespeare demands and musical theater demands, and truth just opens up a whole world of really beautiful, rich, full, thick theater.
Great.
For lack of a better word.
Well done. Isabel, go ahead. Bella.
I actually started off, I was a very like hyper and unfocused little kid. So my parents put me in like all of the physical activities they could, and dance was the one that stuck. So I was in dance classes for a while. And then I did like shows and dance classes at this like local rec center where they put on a lot of very illegal productions of musicals. So we did Beauty and the Beast when I was like 7, and I was Chip. And I was lucky enough to be in New York when I was growing up in Westchester. So we all took a trip to the city one day and watched the Broadway production of Beauty and the Beast. And I just thought it was the coolest thing in the world. And yeah, then I think that's when I was like, yep, this is forever. And I was lucky enough to go to a performing arts high school in Vegas. And so it's always been a part of my life and always something that I wanted to do. And I love the idea of tours and getting to show kids who may not have gotten the same experiences that I did to get to see it.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Next, go ahead, Bailey Savage.
This is going to sound so cheesy, but for me, the most impactful like theater experience was working at the Utah Shakespeare Festival. But I mean that very genuinely. I came to theater pretty late. I always liked being in front of a crowd, and I liked like hosting things and like running events, but it wasn't like, I never got into theater until I watched rehearsals for Peter and the Starcatcher. And watching that whole process, this is when I was working in the Seminar Grove, and then getting to see it performed and just like the sheer physical, emotional magic of that made me want to capture that for the rest of my life. So I've been chasing that feeling ever since. Thank you, Brian. And I love it. It's incredible. And I think that it hits people at different times in different ways. And that to me is what makes it so tangible and so much like meaningful across the board for people maybe who aren't like us, like who are theater nerds who like really like it. If it can spark one person's like, oh, like any sort of thought process or emotion, then that's it for me. So that's why I like tour too.
Cool, cool. Go ahead, Gil. Go ahead, Gil.
I'm so excited. So I saw my like first professional show in Austin when I was like 16. But at that point, I'd already been doing theater for like 2 or 3 years at like this community organization. So it was kind of crazy because we had this really great director who was just basically like, trust in the process. And that's all we did because we had never, or at least I had never seen a show. So I was just like doing this form without ever having seen it. And I remember when I saw my first professional show, I was like, oh, this is what this is like. And I was just hooked. And I think the show that really hooked me was we did a production of A Flea in Her Ear. And I just remember the laughter. And it just got me. And I went to college for a totally unrelated thing. I was going for bio. It was like totally different. And I kind of found my way back through these people and through these communities. And one of the things that I've loved is that my career has kind of involved like teaching artistry as well. And like getting to share arts with like younger generations is so magical because you really do open the door to like imagination and learning, and it all goes together. So I'm really, really excited to bring a show like Julius Caesar that is, I mean, it challenges even me, right? Like even an adult, but to bring it and be like, no, this is our world and this is what we are doing now. So I'm very, very excited for people to see this.
Sweet, sweet. Kenna, and then we'll have Bailey Blaze to close us. Go ahead, Kenna.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I grew up in like a town of less than 3,000 people and like, 2 hours away from the nearest city. So there wasn't much going on in my hometown. But I remember the Missoula Children's Theater would come through every year. And my mom was like, anything to get my kids out of this house. Like, yes, a week of rehearsals, go do it. And so most of my theater career was playing animals, raccoons, birds, that's how I got my start. And I was like, oh, this is fun, but I just didn't really care for theater. And I feel like I relate to a lot of high school students now because when I was in high school, we'd read Shakespeare and I was like, I don't get this. I think it's lame. Like I was like, I don't like Shakespeare. And I totally was just not a fan of that, but I knew that I liked being on a stage and I liked being in front of people. And so I think I'm really excited to be a part of a tour because I can relate to that part of these students, and one thing I love about Caesar, I said this before, I think that the plot is so simple, it's easy to follow, but we have these like really complex characters and I think the text is pretty modern too, and so it's just easier to follow. And I think one thing that I just really love about acting in theater is I get to find a little bit of myself in every character that I play. And every one that I'm doing, I'm like, well, this is a little bit of Kenna over here, and I just feel like it's a great way to not necessarily transform into somebody else, but just find other areas of myself that I didn't realize before. So
Sweet, sweet. And Bailey, bring us home.
Yes, you got it. Yeah, I think I always say I fell into this completely by accident. I grew up, I know my parents were like play sports, and I did. And by the time I was like first grade, I was knee deep in competitive cheerleading and like very gymnastics focused and tumbling. And so then when I got to like the 6th grade, there was a local production and they just needed, they were doing a Christmas Carol and they needed short people to tumble out of the really jolly one under his coat. You came out and you tumbled. And that's really how I started. And like, my mom's like, oh, do this, it'll be fun. And then the next 3 shows I did, I was just like a tumbling elf. I played elves for like a couple years. And then I think I discovered, growing up, my capacity to believe like there were so many options to pursue. I really did think, the world is my oyster. What am I going to do? Who can I be? And I think when I really focused in on theater, it was like, I can try all of these things. You get to create people. How cool is that? You're like a scientist. That's kind of how I feel about it. Yeah. And just kind of haven't looked back since. And
sweet.
I've been rolling.
Cool. Well, I want to welcome our patrons who are watching online. Feel free to ask any questions about anything in the Facebook chat there, and we'll get those questions here. But I'd like to talk about this upcoming production of Julius Caesar. And Brian, Why Caesar? Why now? And I think we can open that up to everybody else too, so they can talk about why this show is so important. Brian, what do you think about that?
Yeah, well, I think, you know, it's impossible not to turn on your television and not sort of see some of the things that are happening in Julius Caesar in our immediate world, you know, insurrection, undermining democracy, these themes that we're debating left and right, you know, who's right, who's wrong. Obviously, Caesar goes to an extreme in this, that, you know, as far as involving an assassination of a political ruler. But I think at the heart of the play is about the repercussions of one's actions and what that does to the individual, and who is right and who is wrong, and what is right and what is wrong. And especially when you're dealing with democracy and language and leadership. All of that is really completely relevant with our world right now, no matter what side you're sitting on. And I think that that's something that is fascinating about the play. I think that it's why we keep doing it. It's why we see it usually in a political election year sometimes, just because it's just, you know, you can't escape what is there. But inside that, which I think Kenneth spoke to, which is like, there's complexity of human beings inside that, which I find really incredibly fascinating. And it's one of the things that I think Shakespeare does incredibly well. Inside this big, tragic, sort of epic landscape is the lone individual isolated thing about conscience and what is right and what is wrong inside of that, and then doing that. This play was actually written around the same time as such other, you know, plays like Hamlet and Henry V, and they have a similar sort of, I guess, you know, platform or outline, that inside of this big thing is the lone individual going, what is right, what is wrong? And in this play, we really see that unfold in a really grand, epic way, and the power of language inside that, which I think incredibly resonant with Mark Antony's speech versus Brutus's speech at the oration. It's a great example of prose and verse and all the things that we look at technically, but inside that is a real human journey. And I think it's incredibly powerful. Also of sort of the private versus the public. And that's another theme that I think Shakespeare is kind of weaving into this, what happens behind closed doors, and then when that gets amplified out into a bigger platform, what that might look like. And I also think no matter what age you are, it's impossible not to see this stuff. And so I think it's important to sort of put that in front of young people, and for them to stoke questions and commentary about what they feel and their heart, mind, and soul inside of something that is actually, while might not be an immediate, reaction for them, at some point will intersect with their life somewhere. You know, you might not see it immediately, but somewhere along the lines, there will have some intersection, and based on that action. So some of that I think is inside of this whole thing. One of the things that I think is unique in this instance is we're doing this under a COVID umbrella right now, where we're actually unable to actually go into schools. And that's one of the unique things about this tour, as Ben recognized, was going to theaters or Kappa gymatoriums or, these small community platforms. We have elected to sort of do this as a video platform and perform the play live here, but capture it via video and provide access for this for educators across the Intermountain West, which is really what this is about. And I think we're seeing more and more of that, obviously in our current world of a lot of theater companies utilizing this technology. But I also think the play actually resonates underneath that umbrella in ways that are really unique also, about how we capture media inside of the lone individual, again, battling their conscience. So I did want to ask actually Ben and Stephen, I know, Ben, one of the things you actually identified about the hurdles of just doing the tour, of touring it, taking it from a 10-foot platform to a much bigger. What are some of the unique challenges with this, knowing that we're going to have this kind of video platform? And what were you thinking as far as the overall aesthetic of the play?
Yeah, so when we designed the show thinking it was going to go out on the road, and when we switched to the video, it didn't drastically affect the scenic design, except for the fact that typically we don't have a lot of props to help us with locations because they won't fit in the truck with everything else. We tend to like really pare that all down a lot. And this time we were like, oh, well, we can actually have a curtain for this scene, or we can have a bench for this scene because we don't have to worry about it fitting in the truck. So we've added a few more elements to help us with location, which I think video wise will help us a little bit. So things look a little different when we go to different places. But otherwise, the rest of it has stayed pretty much the same. I mean, we have some video elements we're playing with in rehearsal to see if they will work. We were going to send projectors and video cameras on the road. So we had some live video sort of being live fed to projectors during each performance. So we're going to try that and see if it reads on the video of it. We're not sure that's going to work yet. So that's something that's why we rehearse, just to figure some of that stuff out. But I think we're basically adding a few more elements to help us make the story clearer via video versus like sort of seeing it live, where we would rely a little more on the actors and the costumes to help us. But that was the only sort of really major change. It's actually really nice because we were able to build the scenery in a way that made it a little bit easier for us to deal with and not have to worry about how it broke apart to fit in the truck. So that was kind of a different take on it.
Good.
Yeah.
Stephen?
Playing off of that as well, now that we have this chance to show more specificity and location, I'm really wanting to try and highlight these characters as we see them in public arenas and then as we see them in private settings. I think there are different things that are said, there are different ways they communicate. And so being able to emphasize those differences, as simple as for the 6 years I've been involved, we've never been able to do a shoe change on tour. I think we might be able to change some shoes because we behave differently with footwear. We behave differently at home when you can come home and take off the jacket and get into your, well, most of the world has been spending time in knit clothing, as opposed to when we have to be in those very formal, very public spaces. And this play jumps back and forth between those. And I think that's kind of fun and going to be insightful. And I want to try and help highlight those.
Cool. I wanted to make sure that our audience understands. So because we talk about a video format and because we're so used to seeing this Zoom world, everybody thinks, so we're not doing in Zoom. There's a really interesting COVID bubble that we've created. So they arrived, they provided a proof of a test. They then also were tested again, and they are now sitting alone in their apartments. And we have had a week of Zoom rehearsals. So we'll have Zoom rehearsals. And then next week we get to go into the space for the first time. Won't that be exciting to walk in and, engage masked, but still maintain. Our organization has been set up so that there's just kind of like going to Mars on a Mars mission. We've got this, area that's just Julius Caesar, where only Julius Caesar employees will engage and will do their things. And then we'll bring the cameras in and we will shoot, although it's video format, it is a piece of theater. So we're doing a piece of theater that is being recorded within a video format. Because for me, that's what's important, that we celebrate this text and theater piece through this medium here. I want to hear from the cast. And I'm just going to throw this question out and let you get verbose on it, okay? Why is Julius Caesar so important now, and specifically about this production that we're telling? Because there are some different things we're doing with this production, even in the first 3 days that we've discovered. What is it about telling this story now through you that you are thrilled with and looking forward to sharing this? Anyone want to start on that? Go ahead, Bella.
So I had this realization yesterday when we were working on Sin of the Poet scene, and we had talked about how this whole production is so timely, and even more timely after what happened a month ago with the mob that stormed the Capitol. And to me, the Sin of the Poet scene, where this unsuspecting person gets torn apart by an angry mob, felt the most like what I was feeling on that day, which is almost like oh my God, here we go again, another group of angry people. And then all of a sudden there's a moment that it clicks and you go, oh my God, this is really serious. This is really violent. What is going on? So yeah, I am sure that we'll discover a lot more of those moments, but that was what stuck out to me yesterday.
Great. Anyone else? Go ahead, Gil.
Oh, what I love about this play is that we get to see the real-time repercussions of political decisions. So, and you kind of get to see how that plays out. So you get to see like the private life of these political players and kind of the political moves they do, but then you get to watch how wide like the net of their decision is cast and all the destruction that happens within it, like in real time, which is very, very interesting. And I was struck by it yesterday when, you know, in that scene where they're discussing who has to die and the fact that they're all family basically, and they're choosing family members for the sake of the republic or for the sake of their own, you know, political, you know, prowess. And it's this idea that we do live in a world where political acts are made, but they affect the common man. And I think this play really highlights that. And I've been really struck by that. Every time we read it, I'm just like, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. But they do. And then we see the damage. And so it really brings that to the forefront, which I think is awesome.
Great. Fantastic. Good. Others? Yes, Jeremy.
One of the things that we've talked about in the first few days is that everyone in the play is doing what they think is right. Every single one of them is trying to save Rome the best way they know how. And they can't conceive of how other people would see it differently. And I think that really muddies who you're rooting for. And I remember the first time I saw it growing up, you root for everyone at different parts of the play. And I think one of the things about this production in particular that Michael, you've talked about is specifically in spoiler alert, the death of Caesar, is everyone having their own individual motivation for doing it. And that being very specific to the characters. So you get these massive group events that happen, but you still have these individuals who are very specific inside of it. And I'm really interested in how we're exploring that.
Beautiful. Good. Other comments? Yes, Bailey Blaze.
Yes. Yeah, I know we talked about this on the first day. And again, for me, the issue has always been growing up, I couldn't see myself in it. I couldn't relate to it. And I was frustrated with not seeing women and having public lives, really. So again, this production in particular with our female, even Caesar and Cassius, and then, you know, you getting to Octavius and having women make real choices and seeing female, you know, actors take on this and live in areas of gray, you know, that are neither good nor bad, kind of what Jeremy was talking about, is just really exciting. And for me personally, again, getting to do Portia in the first half, I know Stephen pointed this out, you know, there's this public and private life, and I get to do the private life as a female who's making her claim as an equal as a female, and then get to be a female playing Octavius in the second half in a public. It's just, it's rad. And there's so much of that going on within everyone in our show.
Cool.
Yeah.
Great. Bailey Savage.
This actually just struck me while you guys were talking about what happens to people when they leave their love. We see this with Brutus and with Caesar when they like literally ignore this part of their life, the love part, the trust, the like human relationship that I think grounds them, and they leave that. They are physically in both of their cases, physically leave them, but also leave those kind of ideals at home. You know, they put that away and then are going on blind ambition, and that's their driving force instead of, you know, leading with love. I think that what happens to people when they ignore that is really what Caesar does, I think.
Cool. Stephen.
I'm not in the conversations in your room, but I often think of Julius Caesar as the antithesis to Hamlet, where Hamlet is a play about indecision and those ramifications. Julius Caesar, people are making very critical decisions, and there's still ramifications of what's going to happen and how those play out. You know, as we look at the canon of Shakespeare and his work, I love that these two plays coexisted and came out of the same brain.
Cool. Wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things I find really fascinating too, is like you have a line like, let us not be butchers, but we'll carve him as a fish, a dish fit for the gods. And you kind of go, yeah, well, you're still, killing them. And like just the justification that people put forth for the cause, it just as a reminder of it's such a short distance in our own lives from conviction to tyranny. It's not that far away. And that is another thing I think that's just so present right now, about what one person thinks might be some simplistically rendered can be completely grossly, a gross inflammatory gesture. I mean, it's unbelievable. And this play has a lot of that in it. As Jeremy said, everybody really believes they're doing the right thing all along,
Cool.
Immediately theatrical.
Yep. Any other? Yes, Cordell.
Everyone's saying some really brilliant things. The only thing that popped into my head was that I hope what we accomplished with our production is just kind of like what Jeremy was saying. At some point, every character is doing what they think is right, and every character is doing what we talked about this on the first day. They're making the decision that they may not think is optimum or optimal, but it's just the most right then. And I hope that as you cheer for different people on different sides through this production, I hope it makes us think about the world we're in right now and how we need to all listen a little more carefully to each other. And if we can do that, then there's a chance. But if we stop listening to each other completely, then that's the game. So I hope that we remind people of that. And I hope we say, no, we're all people. And it's the difference of opinion that makes us both brilliant and so frustrating to each other. And I hope that we can figure out a way to start listening to each other again.
Cool. Good.
I wanted to mention, Michael, that, one of the unique things about the tour, and there's a question in here in the chat, which I think is interesting, that Susan asks, will you have actors available at prearranged live showing for talkback or Q&A for the students? And I always feel that that's been one of an instrumental part of this tour, is not only the presentation of the production, but also the dialogue afterward. And obviously talking to the students about the conceptual ideas, but also their thoughts on the play. And then we should identify also that usually this group would then break out after those Q&As into workshop sessions where you're talking about language or movement or comedy, whatever, based on different productions and everything. I love that aspect of it. I don't know, for those of you that have done the tour before, I know there's a select group of you that have done that. How important do you think that is in this process? I know for this instance, we are going to provide some supplemental material. That's the plan, Michael. You can maybe talk about that afterward. But for those of you that have gone on the tour, and when you went into the classrooms, what was that experience like after doing the show?
Yeah, I'll go ahead, Bailey.
Oh, for me, that's my favorite part. Like that's where the conversations happen. And that's where you see the light bulbs click in a lot of kids' heads. And last year we did Romeo and Juliet. And one of the questions we would ask after every performance was, whose fault is it? And you see the whole crowd of kids and everyone has an opinion, which is so lovely to see these kids like have such strong opinions. And I remember I played Lord Capulet, and there was this tiny girl. She must have been 7 or 8. And she looked at me and she said, it was your fault. And I think then having that discussion about being like, why do you think that? That makes the tour for me, because being able to like look at a kid directly and have that conversation. And I think it'll still translate via Zoom. I think the conversations themselves are what it is important, not necessarily that it is nice to be in person, but I think that those will still resonate, to give the time and space for these kids to be able to have those discussions. To me, it's magic.
Cool. Cordell, you were going to say?
Yeah, I think that was beautifully said. And I also think that it's sometimes just the connection you make with the students afterwards, that they get to see that you were there, specifically as far as representation goes. I've told this story before, but it's one of my maybe top 3 theater stories ever in my life. So I hope you'll indulge me again. We were in Vegas and we had done Macbeth on this tour in 2019. And people had kind of asked me, they said, what do you think about a black man in this particular role? I was playing Macduff, who gets to take out Macbeth. And I honestly didn't think about it until we were at a talkback, and I wasn't saying anything, but there was a group of black students who kept looking at me, trying to get my attention. And I was like, hi, how you doing? And while other people were answering questions about the show, but there was one kid in particular who just keeps just locking eyes. He didn't do anything else but just lock eyes and almost say like, hi, I just want to exist with you for a second. And it was okay. So we did. And then he just was so present, and he literally just kept looking at me but he kept eye contact. And I was like, all right, cool. And then that would happen several times throughout the course of the show, of the talk back. And then his group got up to leave early, but again, he looks back at me one more time, makes eye contact, and very specifically flashes me the Wakanda Forever from Black Panther, connects again, turns and leaves. And I just thought to myself, I guess that was the first time I realized. I was like, oh, in this particular instance, you do get to kind of be the hero. And for a black student who's growing up, I grew up without a father, so and that's kind of a black culture thing. Sometimes it's a stereotype, but it's true. We grow up without our fathers, and to not see a male figure do something heroic in your life, to see that live for the first time could be a big moment. And I'd never thought about that. So sometimes along with it, I think, yes, answering the questions, but sometimes I think it's just connecting and the representation we get to bring into these homes that may not have ever seen that before. It's a really special thing.
Good. And intentional. I mean, I think it's very, very important that not only do students see themselves, and we prep talkbacks, and there's all sorts of different ways to a theater career up here. We've all found our own different paths. There's all sorts of different family backgrounds. I want them to see themselves, but I also want them to see people that they haven't seen before too. And see success on multiple levels, because, and we've already talked about it, multiple voices make these plays happen. Multiple voices make them happen. I want to make sure that we answer these 2 questions. Jenny is asking, will this year's virtual tour production be available to the public at all? I would love to see it. The answer is yes. So we film, and then we take 2 weeks, we put it together, and then we release it for anyone to watch on March 15th, the Ides of March. So on the Ides of March, anybody can do it. All that we ask is you just tell us who you are and how many people are going to see it, because we got a lot of people paying for it, and I got to give credit to that. So you want to show it at home, for family night? That's fantastic. It's a beautiful show for family night. You just get on there and anyone can watch it, school or otherwise, community groups, families. Susan, will you have the actors available at prearranged live showing for talkbacks or Q&A for the students? The answer is yes. Are you a plant, Susan? On that same website, go to bahr.org, go to education, go to tour, go down there. You can click to see it, and then we'll give you access to the video. And then if you want a live workshop taught by one of these amazing people engaging in this discussion, you'll have them for you. Absolutely. You just have to sign up for it there. So, yep, and that's available for you as well. Eric asks, what are some of the differences, positive or negative, likes or dislikes, about performing without an audience? That's tough. And we've broached that a little bit. I'm going to lead. I miss being in a room with these people, but it's been really fun directing this production over Zoom because of the way I teach, because I can go, Jeremy, you raised your eyebrow. Huh, interesting. What are you thinking right now, Cordell? Bailey, what are you doing over here? Gilberto is so much fun in a Zoom room. He's so much fun. I can hardly wait to contain him in live settings here. So I get this feedback via Zoom, but it's really hard. At the end of the day, it's hard giving to something that doesn't give that back. So anybody want to talk about performing virtually and otherwise? Gilberto, go ahead. My wife is, go ahead.
One of the things that I think is kind of like I don't know, I miss the audience so much. It's with all of my heart and soul and everything, it's like this huge absence. But what it does in a different way is it causes you to kind of like laser focus on your other actors and be like, all right, here we are, and the energy is here. And so it's taught me kind of to give a little more. There's some part of you kind of clicks into overdrive inside and is like, all right, then we are gonna just do it. And it's very pure in that sense, because it's not for anyone. It's not like self-serving. It just completely cuts that part out, and it's about the connection and about the text. So that's been the magic for me about doing this over Zoom, that it's like I'm literally in my living room right now in a chair, you know, but I've, for the past 3 days, have been in Rome in my head. And so it's like this very interesting, weird thing when we get breaks and I walk into my kitchen and I'm like, oh yeah, I'm in Utah. Like, it's like you have to buy in. You have to buy in twice as much, but when you do it, it's magical.
Cool. Anybody else? Anybody else want to talk about that? Cool. I have another question I want to get to you, and we've got like 4 minutes left. So you're gonna have to spit your answers fast, but I really want to hear from all of you. We've only been here for 3 days. What do you hope students will come away with? What's the lesson you want them to see from this show? Just nice, quick, and fast. And I'm going to start, okay? Everyone only talks about the assassination with this show. And then the show ends and we forget that there is a back end of this show that is so important because of the consequences. And I'm not just talking about, bludgeoning Cinna. I mean, watching the arc of different characters and the consequences that happen for me is really, really rich to see. And I'm so excited that audiences are going to be able to see and follow the track with these really, really great actors. So that's mine. What else? Yep, go ahead, Kenna.
I think, that people are flawed, and we've touched on it before, that these characters think they're doing the right thing. And, it's not always black and white. There's a lot of gray area there. And I think just the humanity of Caesar, I hadn't really noticed that until, these past 3 days of rehearsal where we're breaking it down and we're talking about it. But yeah, I would want them to take away that people are flawed and all the humanity that's going on. And just, I think, being kinder to one another and forgiveness and all of those things, especially today.
Sweet. Good. Who else?
I'll just pile on to something that Bailey Savage said earlier, that idea of the love. I really liked that. And I hope I think that students can take away the love that all these characters have, both for each other, even when they're fighting each other, and for country, and for their love for the hope for their future. I think everyone is hoping for the best all the way through this play.
Sweet. Isabella.
I hope that we can do something that makes kids who see Shakespeare as something inaccessible. Maybe it's never been a part of their culture. Maybe they just look at it as something that is like, pretentious or whatever. And we're able to make them see that it is for everyone. It is for the common man, as it was originally intended to be, and that they see themselves in us. And I love that story, Cordell. I think that's really nice. Yeah.
Sweet. Good. Go ahead, Daria.
Something that I feel, especially the weight or the responsibility as the character that is typically known as the villain. I feel like my responsibility in part is, and ours is, how do these kids honestly see themselves in the person that is traditionally known as the villain? Like, how do we make him reachable and not so far removed? Like, oh, he's the villain. That's not me. And I think one of the beauties of theater is having that mirror in front of you that makes you think and makes you modestly discover to yourself that of yourself, which you yet know not of, makes you look at that villain and go, my God, like I can see me and I get it. So to make it reachable.
Great. Super. Bailey. Oh, shoot. Both hands are up. Bailey Savage.
I think what's very interesting is how many times the characters in this play ignore warning signs or ignore the truth. They just choose to, they choose not to listen. And so I think that I want somebody to I want a kid to be like, well, why didn't they just listen? And the idea of like, what happens to people when they ignore the truth?
Sweet. And Bailey Blaze.
Kenna, you stole mine. So I am going to my second one, which is that I do hope people watch this and really track in every moment who has power, how they got it, with the choices they make with it, and watch how when they get that, how that affects everyone else around them, and how easily that shifts, and how we sometimes don't even question how they get it, why they got it. I think that's important just in life.
Wonderful. Gilberto.
Very similar to Bailey. I hope that students and people alike, and adults alike, are empowered to just kind of look at people in positions of power and kind of question it. And because the mob in this play is so easily swayed, and I think that's a big commentary on kind of who we are as a society. And I think if someone had just taken 1 second to ask why, I think this play could have gone a lot different. So I'm hoping that students feel empowered to look at our political players and ask well, why, and kind of change, their beliefs or what they think going forward because of that question.
Wonderful. Cool. Thank you. Brian, any last words before we close?
No, I mean, I love that. One of my favorite things about the tour actually is just because we have been able to sort of shrink it down, it's already given us a green light for the intersection and sort of the gender neutrality inside some of this stuff. And I love that, because I think that's something we need to keep propelling in our world, that we're not sort of identified by labels, that inside that is somebody, a person. And I think the tour really is a great example of that people are switching in and out of shoes, I guess, in many ways, and it becomes universal, and there's a universality to it that does exhibit all of the things that we go, yeah, people are fallible, we make mistakes, there's great humanity in that, and some learn from it, some don't. But that to me is just a great message to be putting out into our world, this sort of open your perspective on what we think is one person's identity based on some dude that wrote this thing, hundreds of years ago. That no, it can be this, it can be this. And that's what's, I think, so vital and beautiful about theater. And it's one of the things I love about this tour, is kind of just going, we can do anything. Here it is. Let's put the people together and let's put it out there. And it's great to hear that from young people sort of identifying themselves inside the work. And I think that that's really imperative for us as the tour evolves, because we do see ourselves in those people that sometimes we categorize as a villain, who aren't really a villain, I just think it's an interesting examination. That's just my own little tidbit on that, but I'm so thrilled. I'm so psyched you guys are here. As I said in our first meeting, it's such a shot in the arm to sort of have artists here. And even though you guys are isolated in isolation, to know that everybody's working towards getting this back in front of people is really exhilarating. And I know that with Ben and Stephen also in the creative energy inside this. And I just welcome you guys. I'm excited to see it resonate with people, and us sort of embarking on our own little journey here in the next couple of weeks to try to make it happen. It's pretty cool. And Michael's energy is always just so beautiful. I love when you click into PR mode. Yes, we got to, it's just we can all, it's one of my favorite things about Michael Bahr is just bottle that a little bit and just, intersect that energy where you need it. It's absolutely what you want in an education director who's just, such a proponent and advocate for this type of work, and getting it in front of young people is really imperative, and it's a beautiful thing. So I'm grateful. I'm excited. It's fun. Yeah. Cool. Thanks for being here.
I want to thank all of you for being here. I know I'm going to see you in rehearsal in about 2 hours after we get some fittings done. And just really, really, really grateful for everything you've brought so far. I know that our audience is really, really going to join this. I want everyone to get a chance to see your work, because they will see Cascas and Cassiuses and Brutuses and Luciuses they've never seen before. And I didn't mention the rest of your names, but You know what I'm saying there. It's really, really exciting. Anyone can play anything. And when they do, when Shakespeare's text goes in that mouth and comes out and they hear themselves, it will be rich. So thank you very much. Again, a special thanks to Cedar City Bryan Head and Tourism Bureau for making this possible. Really, really grateful. Enjoy our new intro and outro music that we have as well. And we'd love you to purchase tickets for this summer season. We're going to be open and we're looking forward to that. We want to see you here live. This is another step getting you to that position. Thank you very much. And we'll see you next week.